I first noticed him the way you noticed a candle holding out in a drafty room. He sat near the back, not hiding, just conserving energy the way someone does when every hour has a price. His backpack looked like it had learned to carry more than books. The strap was frayed, and the zipper teeth were tired. But it stayed loyal to him, the way endurance stays loyal to the young. After class he lingered to copy notes from the board, tracing each word as if they were rungs on a ladder. He was determined to climb. The campus was in late autumn then. Wind slipped through the oaks and scattered brown leaves across the steps, small paper boats pushed by a cold river of air. He walked those steps with a measured patience, never rushing, as if speed had become something he could not afford. I learned his name from the roster, and his grades from the quiet diligence he poured into every assignment. In the margins of his essays he left small flashes of thought, honest and unadorned, like pebbles he had polished in his pocket on long bus rides. I could read the shape of his days without being told. Early shifts that began when the city was still yawning. Coffee grabbed, not sipped. A wallet that carried more worry than cash. He carried the weight of unpaid balance and the heavier weight of doubt, that old stone many students know too well. You could hear it in the way he asked for deadline extensions with careful politeness, as if he feared even his need might be too loud. Yet there was a tenderness about him that kept warm what the winter of his circumstances tried to chill. He gave up seats in crowded rooms. He held doors without spectacle. He listened to classmates whose voices trembled. On the board one afternoon I wrote a single word and let it hang there, not as a rule, not as a threat. We spoke of its ordinary forms, not the grand gestures that make headlines, but the humble acts that stitch the day back together when it tears. I watched him absorb the idea the way dry ground takes rain. When students packed to leave, he waited until the room thinned out, then gathered an abandoned notebook, set it on the front desk, and nodded a quiet goodbye. In his eyes lived both hunger and mercy, two travelers sharing a small loaf. I did not yet know the road they would take him down, only that he was learning to carry both. It was a late afternoon when the moment arrived, disguised as something ordinary. The campus library was half-lit, the kind of dimness where shadows curl in corners and voices turn softer. He had gone there to find quiet, to stretch his study hours the way some people stretch meals. At the far table sat a young woman, shoulders folded in on themselves, her hands pressed to her face as if she could hide inside them. Scattered before her were forms, a financial statement, and a notice with the university's seal. The word due stood out like a scar. It had the sharpness of a locked door, a future suddenly barred. He froze, because pain that close is a mirror. It echoed his own fears too clearly. He knew what it was to count bills again and again, hoping numbers would shift if he stared long enough. She whispered to herself, not to him, but the words reached him anyway. She had tried everything: extra hours at work, appeals for aid, phone calls that ended with silence or rejection. The numbers would not bend. The future she had imagined was slipping away, not with a storm but with the quiet cruelty of paper. The debate inside him already fierce. His own tuition was barely covered. He thought of the professor's lesson, that kindness is not measured by what you have left over, but by what you are willing to give away. The voice of caution rose up like a guard at a gate. What if helping her meant losing himself? What if he reached out and then fell short when his own deadline arrived? For a long moment he sat in the silence between impulse and fear. He wanted to stand, to leave, to convince himself it was not his place. Yet his eyes kept returning to the girl at the table, her future cracking like thin ice beneath her. He realized that sometimes the question is not whether we can afford to help, but whether we can afford not to. That night he walked home with the decision pressed against his chest like a secret letter. The streets glowed faintly with the amber light of old lamps, each one flickering as though it too carried a burden. He counted the bills in his wallet once more when he got home, though he already knew the number. It wasn't much, not compared to the mountain that tuition demanded, but it was something. It was all he had. Sleep did not come easily. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling where faint cracks looked like unanswered questions. His friends' voices ran through his head, the ones who always warned him to think of himself first. They would say he was foolish, reckless even, to risk his own future for someone he barely knew. And yet another voice rose inside him, softer but stronger, the echo of his professor's words. Kindness does not ask if it is convenient, it only asks if it is true. By morning, his decision had rooted itself. He walked to the financial office with steps that wavered but did not stop. The stranger was already there, clutching papers as though they were shards of glass. When she looked up, her eyes were red, her expression carrying the dull weight of surrender. He approached slowly, unsure of how to speak. Words felt small against the enormity of what he was about to do. He told the clerk he wanted to cover her balance. For a moment the world held its breath. The clerk raised their eyebrows, the girl froze, and even he felt the surrealness of hearing his own voice say something so irreversible. But the transaction went through, numbers shifting on a screen, transforming despair into possibility. His savings vanished in an instant, but with them, so too did the silence of her hopelessness. The girl turned toward him, stunned. Her mouth opened as though to protest, to ask why, but no words came. Instead, her tears fell again, not with the heaviness of defeat, but with the tremor of relief. She reached for his hand, trembling, and in her eyes was a gratitude too deep for speech. He only nodded, because sometimes silence is the purest language. Walking away, he felt strangely lighter. His future was still uncertain, his challenges unchanged, but something inside him had shifted. He had given away what little he had, yet he did not feel poorer. In fact, he felt richer in a way no account could measure. For the first time, he understood that sacrifice can become its own kind of wealth, one that grows not in banks but in the unseen gardens of the heart. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect on the power of kindness in your own life. Share it, speak about it, let it plant a seed. And if you found meaning here, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to join us in keeping these stories alive. Together, we can keep spreading light where the world needs it most.